everyone, I'm back, and this time with another band I have never heard before. In fact, I never even heard the name before today. And before I get into the details, just remember you can always check out my Ko-fi and Patreon if you want to follow the Beatles 150 series or the Queen series, and also the videos which I can't put public here because of copyright issues. Things that will never be able to go public. But let's dive into this. This is a band called Jane's Addiction. And says Jane's Addiction is an American rock band from Los Angeles, formed in 1985. A pioneer of alternative rock, Jane's Addiction is credited for the mainstream exposure of the alternative music scene in the 90s. The band is also associated with the funk metal genre. Okay. Jane's Addiction's music contains elements of heavy metal, punk rock, folk, jazz fusion, funk rock. Did I say punk rock? Hold on. Punk rock, funk rock. Okay, it's two different things. Psychedelic rock and progressive rock. Jane's Addiction is regarded as one of the most influential acts in alternative music. Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine compared the band's influence to that of Nirvana. Well, I think I said it right that time. Nirvana. I think I got it right. You can check out my Nirvana first listen if you want to hear me say it wrong. Nirvana. This song, Then She Did, is a cut that guitarist Dave Navarro called a very dark song about death. Like Lennon and McCartney, both Navarro and Farrell lost their mothers during their youths. If you're wondering why Jane's has such a dark sound, Navarro's mother was murdered by her boyfriend when Dave was a teenager, and Perry's mom committed suicide when he was only 3 years old. That's some pretty dark history there. A tribute to their deceased mothers, Then She Did, is one of the most personal songs and one that showed that Jane's Addiction were more than just another Hollywood band. This is going to be interesting. Sounds like we're going to the dark side a bit. So, let's see how it goes. This intro immediately sets me up with a sort of storytelling feel. Bum dee dum, bum dee dum, da da dum, bum dee dum. I feel like I'm getting ready to hear a story, something kind of a narrative. We'll see if that's true.
Paints are dry. And I looked outside.
Pause it there for a minute because I have something in my mind I want to say. It's so interesting the way this piece of music, as I said, it starts off with a sort of storytelling atmosphere right from the start. And then this riff, bum dee dum, da da dum, bum dee dum, da da dum, ba da dum, becomes a big feature. And the lyrics are set spaced wide apart across this instrumental background. It doesn't really feel like a verse being sung. It's more meditative, a little bit more abstract feeling. A little phrase here, then this long gap where there's just instrumental background, which is not really background, it's the instrumental pattern which I'm hearing as the focal point. Then finally, another little phrase set. It has a very visual art feel to it, because I can imagine some abstract piece of artwork with just a little bit of color here, a little bit of something here. Something else comes elsewhere. But, and it's not random, but it's not the typical verse line after line after line after line, then a break, then verse line after line after line. It's kind of nice the way they set it up that way. It gives a lot of space for meditating on the ideas being presented. Now her paints are dry, and then we're left to think about that. Her paints are dry. Her paints are dry. Was she a painter? Well, this is about their death. Perhaps her paints are dry because she's no longer painting. And I looked outside, and then there's this long space of silence again, and we're left to imagine what it is to look outside. And then after a good space of time, we find out what we were looking outside at the Corner Boys. Such expansiveness here. Not in the orchestral sense, but in the spacing of the text on top of the music, and the way the ideas are presented and the flow of the piece of music. All right, let's go on. This section almost has a little bit of a Pink Floyd The Wall feel to it. The way he's using the guitar on these couple little notes, the way that Pink Floyd uses just a few little elements of music to create this entire atmosphere. And this is a little bit less spare, a little more generous in the use of musical content. But still, listen to this. Dee-dee, dee-dee, dee-dee. Just a few little notes. Dee-dee, da-dum, da-dum, bum, bum, da-dum. That could be Pink Floyd, to my ears at least. There's a bit more complex stuff going on behind than I would expect with Pink Floyd. Or at least it's a different texture. But something about this is feeling like they were maybe trying to channel a bit of that style and use that technique to create this feeling of darkness and ominous quality. with a little bit of strings in there. Da-dum, da-da-dum. Listen. Some more strumming guitar. They like this little figure. Da-da. Ha! Interesting. I'm going to stop there because this little riff, da dum, da dum, bum, bum, da dum, da dum. I went to see your pictures. I spread them across the floor. Imagine someone sitting on the floor with a stack of photos. Da dum, da dum, da dum, bum, bum, da dum, da dum. Da-dum. It feels like they are taking pictures from a stack and placing them on the floor. They can view the whole collection, spread them out, shift them around a bit. Dum, da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. You can feel the little bit of motion that happens when you are taking a photo and placing it. That little bit of a sliding out from off the stack from the other photos. Da-dum. Sliding into place on the floor. Interesting. That whole section, I wanted to hear it play all the way because it has this feeling of inevitability and this, well, as I have begun to feel, a fairly classic driving rock beat and this roar of instruments that just propels us forwards, and we're immersed in the sound. And I wanted to see what they did with it, because to me it felt quite expected. Nothing really unusual about it, except the way they placed, again, the lyrics spread across this vast expanse of sound. I am still feeling this as a sort of modern type of art, visual art. Of course, it's sonic, but it has so many similarities to some of the modern art styles or poetry styles, where you have a phrase and then several dots afterwards, and then another phrase and several dots afterwards. Even the way some modern poetry is printed on a page with these wide gaps between a line. And it gives you this visual feeling of space and inconclusiveness. Almost like you have to not just read between the lines, but fill in between the lines, or at least feel the emptiness between the lines. And that is the way I'm feeling this music. Is there is some emptiness between the lines, this vast expanse of nothing there, nobody there. And you hear this roar of instruments carrying us along. And in spite of all that wall of sound that's hitting us, we feel like somebody or something is lacking in that space. Which is really a really good way of expressing artistically the feeling of loss and absence that one has to deal with if they've lost a parent, especially in such tragic circumstances as these artists did. How does an artist express those feelings, those very personal feelings? How do we communicate them? How do we find a way to display this very intimate part of our personal experience that is both respectful to the ones we've lost and relatable and understandable to our audience? And I think that what's being done here is a beautiful way of doing that with this medium. There are these little pulsing notes, again reminding me of Pink Floyd's The Wall. Just traveling a few notes up and down. Oh, there's some piano. Huh. I'm listening to this piano in the mix here. It's really modern, edgy sounding dissonant here. Almost like Prokofiev. That's really edgy. That's more dissonant than Prokofiev. You're going more modern yet. That was cool. Starting out that passage, it felt very... Well, I said earlier the passage before, it felt predictable, expected. Where this one went, I did not expect that. And with all those dissonances and the piano thrown in there with the high piano notes, kind of scattered, again, abstract. I'm thinking of 20th century classical, modern classical music. Dissonant. Go listen to some of the 20th century Soviet era composers. Or try out some Hindemith piano, Ludus tonalis or something like that. Where it's so painfully dissonant and we sit almost physically feeling the pain of the notes. The edginess, the uncertainty, the angularity of it. Even their orchestral music. The way they use the instruments, the brass and the woodwinds, and it has a sort of cat screeching in pain feeling sometimes, and this is what I'm hearing here. That high piano, it's not sparkly, it doesn't add brightness. It adds sharpness, tension. Yeah, if you took the rock drum out of there, boom, ding, 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 ding. If you took that one element out of here, this could be 20th century classical dissonant style music. Now, don't get me wrong, not all 20th century music in the classical tradition is like this, but there's a good portion of it like this. And it's challenging to listen to. It takes a lot of mental and emotional energy to make your way through some of this music. Because it does come from dark experiences and a very pained view of the world sometimes. Other times it's just composers experimenting with weird sounds, but everyone has to experiment to try something out, right? But the way this passage developed, starting kind of like Pink Floyd, and then moving over towards more of these modern classical dissonant styles. It's fascinating to me to hear this in a piece of music like this. The bass are kind of working together here. Let's go back and listen to that, along with the voice. Listen to the strings. bass is moving down here. The bass is really carrying us through here. Now the strings. And it's building again, this avalanche of sound. Now the strings are taking that riff from the bass. Dum bum bum bum, dee 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 dum bum bum. Now the strings have taken it up high in the space. What an interesting listen to a piece of music that was created to be a tribute to their mothers. Will you say hello to my ma? Will you pay a visit to her? She was an artist just as you were. I'd have introduced you to her. You can feel the longing and the loss, the feeling of emptiness and the desire to be able to share this beautiful personality. She would take me out on Sundays. We'd go laughing through the garbage. She repaired legs like a doctor on the kitchen chairs we sat on. This is somebody who has a bit of a hard life, and yet they have the mother's touch of making everything happy and memorable and special to the child. She was unhappy just as you were. Unhappy just as you were. And the music ends again in this epic style. Unhappy just as you were. Unhappy just as you were. The recognition that this person was very human. They might have seemed like a magician to the child. And we might yearn for the companionship and the connection with our mother. And yet, we understand she had a tough life, and she experienced sadness and pain and unhappiness. And there were times in this music where I felt like it was perhaps too predictable, and other times where I felt like it was a bit of a mishmash of different styles that I've listened to. And somehow it all holds together in spite of that. Somehow it works to create this artistic expression of appreciation for who this person was, just how they were, and expresses all this desire to have a connection, to still have this person in our life. Really beautifully done. And yes, it does remind me of Pink Floyd. It does remind me of some modern classical styles. It does remind me of, there were a bit of almost jazz blues influences in a few places. I can hear all these different elements being brought in. And yet it had this continuity, start to finish. Even though it came in chunks. A gentle chunk, and then a strong power chunk, and then we go back to something gentle, and then we end again very strong and pouring out the emotion in an avalanche of sound. Very nicely done, though. I appreciate it, and I can connect to the expression in a way that I didn't really expect to. So there we have my first experience listening to Jane's Addiction. Then she did. And I was surprised in more ways than one. I'll see you next time.